It was upon a Wednesday in the last week of November, in that year when the great fogs had come early to London and made islands of every gas lamp, that I first heard the bell of St. Ansgar's toll 5 minutes before the hour, and thought no more of it than a man thinks of the striking of any clock that is not his own. I had been reading by the fire in our sitting room at Baker Street. Holmes was at the window with a small copper wire in his hand, turning it slowly, watching a bruise of light on its surface. He had not spoken for an hour. The clock upon our mantel gave a small, polite cough, and struck 3/4 of the hour, and while its last chime yet quivered in the room, there came, from very far away, from over the roofs, over the sluggish river of vapour that lay upon Marylebone, a single, deeper stroke, hollow and slow, as of a great bell that had not been well hung, and mourned itself in the swinging. Holmes lifted his chin. He did not turn. "You heard it, Watson." "A church bell," said I. "St. Ansgar's, is it not, over towards Wigmore Street?" "St. Ansgar in the wall," he replied. "A single stroke, at 11:55 in the forenoon. That is the 3rd time this week. A curious hour to ring. A curious hour indeed. There is no hour of the Christian day at which one strikes a great tenor bell once and then goes to luncheon. A funeral bell tolls a longer count. A passing bell has its rule. The Angelus, if it were ever rung by an Anglican church, which it is not, would be at noon, and would be 3 and 3, not 1. And it is not the quarter, for the quarter has just gone from our own clock." "Perhaps," said I, "the rope was pulled by accident." "Perhaps," said he, and set the copper wire down without looking, and it fell exactly upon the corner of the tobacco slipper. "But I have heard it on Monday and on Tuesday and again today, always at the same minute, always the single stroke, always the same bell. I do not know a way of pulling a bell rope by accident 3 days running at the same instant of the clock." He came to the fire and stood there a moment with his hands behind his back. The gas hissed low in the sconce. The coals settled with that small red sound they make when they are half burnt through. "There is a wire," he said, "that I have been amusing myself with. It is copper, of the gauge used in the newer domestic bell systems, the kind that has replaced the old crank and lever in wealthy houses. It came off my sleeve this morning as I passed a certain door in Wimpole Street. It ought not to have been on my sleeve. It ought not to have been in the street at all. You think there is a matter. I think there is a matter, Watson. What I do not yet know is whether the matter has begun, or whether it is about to begin. In such cases," said he, and now for the first time he smiled, and it was that thin, economical smile which meant he had already decided upon a course. "I prefer to be present at the beginning. Would you spare me an hour tomorrow?" "I should be glad to." "Then let us be under the wall of St. Ansgar's at 11:50. And let us go on foot, that we may listen as we walk." He turned to the mantelpiece and took down his pipe. He filled it, tamped it with the practised thumb, and lit it with a splint from the fire. The smoke went up quietly. He said, in the same off-hand voice with which he might have remarked upon the weather, "It is not a hymn, Watson. It is a signal." "To whom?" "That is the question," said Sherlock Holmes, "which will occupy me until 11:55 tomorrow." He said no more that evening upon the matter of the bell. He read, however, a small pamphlet upon the founding of city churches, and I saw him at one point set his finger upon a page and read the same sentence 3 times. He made 3 telephone calls at the instrument in the corner, of which I heard only the endings. The last of these included the words, "And, if you would be so kind as to inspect the parish register for the summer month, I should be greatly in your debt." At 10 he went to bed, which was not his custom, so that I understood the following morning was to be an early one for him and a punctual one for me. I lay awake some little time. I heard a hansom go by. I heard once a dog bark in the yard behind the mews. I heard, though I could not have sworn to it, the little clock in Holmes's own room strike the hour, and then a long, thoughtful silence, in which I fancied I could feel him lying with his eyes open in the dark, turning the copper wire over in his mind. It is one of the peculiarities of a long friendship that one can, sometimes, feel the thinking of another man through a wall. We were in Wimpole Street at 11:15. The fog had thinned in the night and lay now only in the lower reaches, so that as we walked one saw the upper stories of houses standing above a river of vapour, as islands stand above a sea in a print. The chimneys smoked upward into a paler, clearer air. There was a smell in the streets of coal, of wet stone, and, once, faintly, of oranges from a barrow. Holmes walked with his hat pulled low and his stick tucked under his arm. He said, as we turned into the narrow curve of Weymouth Street, "You will observe the houses upon our right, Watson, 5 of them together. Take the middle one, the one with the black door and the brass numeral rubbed thin, the very one. That is number 17. Dr. Enoch Farrimond, physician, has practiced there these 18 years. He is a bachelor, has a widowed housekeeper, a stable boy who sleeps out, and one servant girl who sleeps in. He has one patient only at present, of whom the whole street speaks. A single patient, Colonel Sir Marcus Brenton, late of the Bengal Cavalry, an invalid of long standing, whose apartments Dr. Farrimond has attended twice daily this last year in the house next door, number 19. Holmes stopped and lifted his stick, and pointed to it with the air of a man showing me a curiosity in a museum. The Colonel is very rich. He is also very much alone. There is no wife, no children, and, one is given to understand, no near heir except a nephew abroad. Dr. Farrimond attends him at 8 in the morning and at 7 in the evening. He also, since the summer, calls at midday. It is upon this midday call that I wish you to fix your attention. Why? Because a physician who is regular at 8 and regular at 7 is following a schedule of medicine. A physician who has, in addition, contrived a midday visit is following something else. But surely a serious invalid is asleep at midday, Watson, or ought to be. And the Colonel, by every account, dozes from 11 until 1, that being the settled habit of his last illness. He drew from his coat a small leather notebook, and opened it, and shut it again without looking. The midday visit was instituted upon the 7th of August of this year. Since that date, Dr. Farrimond has crossed from number 17 to number 19 at 11:50 every day, remained a quarter of an hour, and returned to his own door at 7 minutes past 12. I have this from the housekeeper of number 21, who dislikes both establishments equally, and is therefore a reliable witness. I laughed. "You have been busy." "I have been walking the street," said Holmes gravely, "and there is no substitute for it. A case that is entered at Baker Street is a case seen through a window. A case entered upon its own ground is a case walked into by the front door. Now, the bell." We had come to the corner of the little churchyard of St. Ansgar in the wall. It was a black stump of a church, a survival, hemmed round on 3 sides by taller houses, and its tower rose no higher than the 4th-storey windows of its neighbours. The clock upon its face showed 11 and 49. "You will remain here, Watson, at the mouth of this alley. You will watch number 19. You will note the instant at which Dr. Farrimond enters, and you will note if any other person approaches or leaves. Above all, at the exact minute the bell is struck, should it be struck, you will observe the door of the Colonel's house. And you? I shall be within the church." He was gone before I could reply, in through the low arch door, with a movement so quiet that I did not see him go, only the swing of the door and the settling of it upon its latch. I stood in the shadow of the alley and drew out my watch and set it against the clock upon the tower. It was 11:50. As I did so, I saw a man in a black frock coat and a silk hat come out of number 17, carrying a small physician's bag. He crossed the street unhurriedly. His face I could see clearly, a full, mild face, greying at the temples, with a small, precise beard and the pale eyelids of a man who reads much by lamplight. He mounted the 4 steps of number 19 and struck the door once with the knocker. It was opened by a manservant. He went in. The door closed. The clock said 11:51. I waited. Nothing else stirred in Wimpole Street. A boy went by with a covered basket. A cab passed at the further corner and turned into Wigmore Street and was gone. The upper windows of number 19 were curtained. The lower were shuttered against the cold. A cat crept along the area railing of number 21, sat, considered me, and went its way. At 11:54 I heard footsteps within the alley behind me, but when I turned it was only the sexton of St. Ansgar's coming out at a side door with a coil of rope over his shoulder. He nodded to me as he passed, and went off up the pavement with the quick, short step of an old military man. He did not enter the tower. The clock struck the 3/4, and then held its breath. And then, a full minute later, I heard it. It was the very bell we had heard from Baker Street, though so much nearer now that I felt the stroke in my teeth. One deep, hollow note that swung and would not have done. And in the same instant, I say the very instant, for I had my eyes upon the door, I saw the door of number 19 twitch. It did not open. It moved a hair's breadth, as though someone within had laid a hand upon it, thought better of it, and stepped back. Then it was still. Holmes came out of the church door a moment after, dusting his knee. He did not look at me. He crossed the street with a stride so light and rapid that I had to hasten to keep him in view, and he was at the door of number 19 before the last shiver of the bell had left the air. He rang. The manservant opened, and Holmes handed him a card and stepped past him with the smooth authority that always astonished me, and the door shut on both of them. I remained in the alley, my heart uneasy. I could not have said why. There had been nothing to see, a door that stirred, a bell that rang, but I had learnt, in years beside Holmes, to trust the small, cold thing that lay under my breastbone when a case had begun. He was out again in 6 minutes. He walked past me down the pavement without a look, and I fell in with him at the corner. "Well?" I asked. "The Colonel is very ill," he said, in the tone of a man reporting the weather. He was asleep. Dr. Farrimond was with him. I said I had come from a Mr. Ainsley, an old acquaintance of the Colonel's, a name I invented in the porch, Watson, and which the manservant did not question. The doctor received me politely. He said the Colonel could see no one. He said the Colonel had not, indeed, been out of his bedchamber these 5 weeks. And the door twitched. The door twitched at the stroke of the bell. Yes. What does it mean, Holmes? He did not answer for the length of 2 street corners. He had drawn out a folded paper from his pocket, and was studying it as we walked, holding it low against his coat. It was a small square of yellow paper, covered in a hand I could not read at that distance. "There is a chemist," he said at last, "at the corner of Marylebone High Street, who has kept of late an interesting book. It records the prescriptions written by Dr. Farrimond for the Colonel over the past year. I have obtained a copy through the good offices of a young man in his employ. The prescriptions are not, taken singly, remarkable, but the pattern of them," he tapped the paper, "is very singular." "How?" "Certain remedies," said he, "which taken alone are innocent, will, if taken together in careful proportion, produce a fixed and rigid state of the muscles that resembles the last hours of a natural decline. It is not death. It is not even quite a stupor. It is a kind of walled-in sleep, from which the patient may be roused within a set number of hours by the correct antidote, and out of which, if the antidote is not given, he will pass into an authentic death by slow degrees, with no bruise upon him, and no mark upon the linen, and no note in any bottle to hang the physician." I stared at him. "You mean—" "I mean," said Holmes, "that Colonel Sir Marcus Brenton may, at this moment, be neither ill in the ordinary sense, nor dying in the ordinary sense, but held, and that his physician, who has excellent knowledge and unusual patience, has for some months been the keeper of the door. But for what purpose?" He folded the paper. "For a purpose which requires the daily striking of a certain bell at a certain minute. Now, Watson, tell me what you saw at the moment the bell rang." The door of number 19 twitched, as though somebody within had thought to open it. Yes, the Colonel's manservant did not open it, for I saw him myself 2 rooms away when I entered. Dr. Farrimond did not open it, for he was upstairs. The maid was in the scullery. There is no other adult in the house. Then there is another person in the house whom I have not yet named, and I do not think, Watson, that he, or she, was expected to move at the sound of the bell, but rather to stay very still, and gave that door its little jump only because a bell rung upon 3 days at the same hour becomes, upon the 4th, an anticipated thing that one cannot help preparing for. Habit betrays us all. Come, we shall lunch, and then I have a call to make in Chancery Lane. I could get nothing more from him that afternoon. He went out at 2 with a small parcel under his arm, and returned at 5 without it, and he was uncommonly silent all through dinner, so that I sat opposite him half in vexation and half in that pleasure I always took in watching him think. Once he laughed shortly to himself. Once he wrote 3 lines upon the back of an envelope and thrust it into the fire before I could see what it was. He drank his coffee standing and did not touch his cheese. Only later, when I had risen to go to bed, he said, "Watson, we shall be up early in the morning. Bring your revolver. It is not that I expect to want it. It is that in a case where one man has already been buried alive, if I read the signs, I do not care to arrive at the second act unarmed." Buried alive, in a manner of speaking. The Colonel is very quiet in his bed, and very rich, and cannot alter his will. His will, that, Watson, is where I went today. There is a solicitor in Chancery Lane, one Mr. Pettifer, whose clerk was once useful to me in the little business of the Ravenshoe diamonds. Mr. Pettifer holds the Colonel's testament. He was not disposed at first to be communicative. He is now more so. Holmes rose and stretched his long arms above his head. I do not yet know how the trick is worked. I know only who profits by it, and how, and that the profit has not yet been taken. There is a mechanism in this case, Watson, which I have not laid my hand upon. Until I have, I do not intend to say what it is. But you know the criminal. I know the criminal. I do not yet know the crime. He would say no more. I confess I slept poorly that night. It was not fear. I had been in graver corners with Sherlock Holmes than any that this quiet Wimpole Street matter had yet threatened, but a kind of unease of the imagination. The image of a great tenor bell tolling once at a fixed minute, and a door somewhere in the town twitching at the sound of it, would not leave me. I thought of the Colonel in his bedchamber, walled in by a sleep that was neither honest sleep nor honest death, and of the doctor who came and went at 11:50, and I thought too, for the first time, of the sexton with the coil of rope. He had not entered the tower. Yet the bell had rung. I turned this over and over in my mind, and got no comfort from it, and it was only when the first grey came into the window that I fell into an uneasy sleep and dreamt of a river of yellow paper flowing down Wimpole Street. We were abroad early. Holmes had risen before 6, and by 7 he had breakfasted, dressed with unusual care, and gone out. He returned at 9, ate a second breakfast standing at the sideboard, and told me to put on my greatcoat. It was a cold, clear morning. The fog had gone. The sky above the chimney-pots was the pale, hard blue of a winter that means business. To Wimpole Street? Not yet. To St. Ansgar's. The little church was empty when we entered, save for an old woman polishing brass at the altar rail, and, at the further end, the sexton I had seen the day before. He was a spare, upright man of 60, with a shaven cheek and a grey moustache clipped close, and when he saw Holmes, he straightened, as an old soldier will, and touched his forehead. "Sergeant Halloran, is it not?" said Holmes. "19th foot, sir, retired. You keep the tower." "I do, sir, and the yard and the vestry, and the small brasses when Mrs. Kettering is unwell. Do you also ring the bell?" "There is only the one bell, sir, and I ring her for services and for the passing. I have not rung her at other times these 12 years. You did not ring her yesterday at 11:55. The old sergeant looked at Holmes with a very steady eye. "I did not, sir. I have never rung her at that hour in my life. I was in this very yard yesterday at that hour, coming out with a length of rope for the coffin lift at Mr. Draycott's." "I heard her ring, sir. I heard her ring on Monday and on Tuesday too, and I have been in this church every day these 12 years, and I know when a rope is pulled and when it is not." "You are certain no man has entered the tower these 3 days?" "I am certain, sir. The door to the tower is here." He walked us to a low door in the north wall of the nave. It was of oak, banded with iron, and bore an old brass keyhole. He drew from his belt a heavy iron key. "There is one key. I keep it upon me by day, and upon a nail beside my bed by night. The door has been locked at every hour these 3 days. I have opened it myself only for my own going up and coming down, and I have not been up during the forenoon. And yet the bell rings, sir. I have wondered at it. I thought at first it was some other bell in the town that Trick of the Fog was carrying to my ear. But it is our bell, sir. I know her tongue. She has a flatness in her lower note that no other bell in London has. She was cast in 1812, sir, and her tin was short." "You told this to no one?" To whom should I tell it, sir? A bell that rings when no man rings her is not a matter one carries to the vicar. He is a young man, sir, and has the notions of a young man about the older parts of the church. He would have thought me fanciful, and I do not care to be thought fanciful. Holmes had gone to the little door. He knelt and looked closely at the lock, and then at the threshold, and then he ran his hand along the frame. He rose. Might we go up? You might, sir. He unlocked the door. A narrow stair wound within, cold, close, and dark. The sergeant lit a lantern and led. Holmes went second and I last, and I had my hand upon the revolver in my pocket, though I could not have said what I feared to meet at the top of a church tower on a clear November morning. There was nothing at the top but the great bell in its cage and the raw grey light coming in at the louvers. The rope hung down through its hole in the beams, thick as my wrist, waxed with the hands of generations. Holmes looked at it a long moment. He touched it. He held his palm against the bell itself, then took it away and rubbed his fingers together. Nothing, he said quietly. The bell has not been struck within the last hour. Of course not, sir. It is not yet 10. Quite so. Holmes turned in the narrow space, and now his eye ran along the beams and up into the louvers, and he moved past me to a corner. He knelt again. He put his hand behind a joist. When he brought his hand out, there was a small dark thing in it. He looked at it, and then he held it out to me on his palm. It was a fragment of copper wire. The same gauge, said Holmes, as the one I gathered in Wimpole Street. Sergeant, when did you last sweep behind this joist? Michaelmas, sir. So this wire has come here since Michaelmas. That is well. He rose. There is a scoring on the wood, do you see, sir? A very fine, bright line, as of a wire that has moved to and fro in the passing of many days. It is not deep. It runs, so, to the Louvre, and if I lean out, he did so, cautiously, his shoulder against a beam, it runs down the outside of the tower, along this string course, and, I cannot see further from here, but I can guess. Sergeant, does anything of yours run down the outside of this tower? Nothing, sir. There is a lightning rod at the north corner, but it is on the further side. Good. Now, Sergeant, one further question. Are you a friend of Dr. Enoch Farrimond, of number 17 Wimpole Street? The sergeant's face did not change. I am not, sir. He attends our vicar's wife for a room. That is all I have of him. Has he been in this church of late? He was here upon a Sunday in August, sir. He sat in the second pew from the front. He gave a shilling to the plate. He has not been here since. You are certain of the date. The Sunday after the Feast of the Transfiguration, sir. I remember, because the vicar preached upon the mountain-top, and afterwards the doctor spoke to me in the porch, and asked me the age of the bell, and admired the tower, and requested to see the tower stair, saying he had a fancy for the antique. I did not take him up, sir. It was near dinner, and I had not the time. He went away well enough. He did not ask again? Not to me, sir, but I found, 2 days after, that the little door of the tower had been tampered with. There were fresh scratches at the wards. I said nothing, for I thought it was boys, but I had the lock cleaned that afternoon. Boys, said Holmes softly, do not carry the tools that leave those particular scratches. Boys carry pins and hair grips. This was a picklock's work. Thank you, Sergeant. Say nothing of our visit. Nothing whatever, to anyone, least of all to the vicar. I have said nothing these 12 years, sir, that was worth saying, said the old sergeant grimly. I shall say nothing now. Down we went. In the porch, Holmes paused, and looked back once at the little door in the nave wall, and I saw a very peculiar expression cross his face, a kind of grim amusement, as one might have upon seeing a clever child do a clever thing. He came in August, he murmured, and sat, and thought, and left, and set the wire, no doubt, upon a later night when the church was empty. It is a small church. It would take him a single hour. Holmes, do you mean— I mean, Watson, that a man may ring a bell without touching the rope, if he has the patience to run a fine wire from the bell down the outer face of the tower, along the string courses, over a leaded gutter, into a chimney, and so at last into a room in a house nearby. If the wire is drawn tight from within that room at a fixed minute of the day, the bell answers. It is a signal, as I said. It is a signal that requires no accomplice in the church. But to whom is the signal given? The bell rings for the whole street. To whom indeed, Watson? Come. He led me out and we walked briskly down Wimpole Street. And this time he did not go to number 17, nor to number 19. He crossed at the further end and turned into a mews behind, and stopped there at a small green door in the wall, which was the back way into some house. I could not tell which, for the mews wound and the numbering was hidden. Whose door is this? Number 21, said Holmes. The house of the housekeeper who dislikes both establishments equally. I gave her a sovereign yesterday for the loan of her back stair. I now propose to see what she can do for a second. He knocked softly. The door was opened by an aproned woman of formidable eyebrow, who nodded him within without a word. He said to her in the corridor, "Above stairs, if you please. The room at the front on the second floor." She led us up. It was a plain house, clean and cold. On the second floor she opened a door and stood aside. It was an empty bedroom, unfurnished but for a chair and a small table, and the window looked directly across into the front of number 19, into, as I now saw, a certain window at the level of the second story, which was slightly ajar, though the day was cold. "You have watched this window from here," I said. "I have. It is the window of the Colonel's dressing room. His bedchamber lies behind it. The window is opened by half an inch, only in 1/4 of the hour of every morning, from 11:50 to 12:05, on no other occasion. To air the room? For a room to be aired, Watson, it is customary to open the window when the patient is not in it. This window is opened while the doctor sits with him." I felt again that small, cold thing under my breastbone. "Look, Holmes, the window is open now." "So it is." He drew out his watch. "It is 11:48. He turned to the housekeeper. "Mrs. Culley, would you have the goodness to bring up your kitchen chair and a broom and stand with it at that further window? I do not wish us to be seen from the street." She went and came and set herself as directed. Holmes and I stood back, and he laid a small pair of opera glasses upon the sill and set them very carefully to his eye. The clock of St. Ansgar's, distant behind us, gave the 3/4. "Now," breathed Holmes. I heard nothing. I saw nothing. Then I saw the curtain within the further window twitch, and a hand come forward. It was a small, white, plump hand. Not the hand of a soldier, not the hand of a doctor. It laid itself upon the sash, and it stayed there. The clock's last chime died. A long minute crawled by. And then, at the exact 11:55, from over the roofs, the deep hollow single stroke of the tenor bell of St. Ansgar's in the wall. The hand across the way did not start. It did not tremble. It only lifted a little and drew itself back into the room, and the curtain fell. "You saw?" said Holmes. "I saw a hand." "Whose hand?" "I do not know. Nor do I, Watson, quite, though I have a name in my head, and if I am right, it is a name that has been in and out of this house all summer, and no man of Wimpole Street has once thought to remark upon it. Come away." We came down. Mrs. Culley let us out at the mews door. Holmes gave her another sovereign, though she at first refused it. In the street he stood a moment, drawing on his gloves, and I saw that his eyes were half shut, which was always the sign that some careful arrangement was going forward in his mind. "Watson, we have some hours yet to pass. I do not wish to alarm the parties before their moment. There is a train I must meet at 3 at Paddington, coming down from Peterborough. There is a telegram I have expected since 10, which I now find, upon consulting my watch, ought to be at Baker Street. And there is the small matter of a locksmith in Portman Square whom I wish to persuade to lend me an hour of his time. I would ask you," he said, "to remain within call at our rooms until 7, at which hour we shall dine, and after which we shall, unless I am utterly deceived, put a very small end to a very large wickedness." "You have the answer, then?" "I have the answer. What I do not yet have is the confession of the answer from the mouth of the one who owes it. That, Watson, is a distinction that matters in cases where the law is a slow horse and mercy a small kindness. You will not tell me now?" He looked at me with something like affection. "Old friend, if I told you now what I believe, you would go to that house before nightfall, and you would break the door in, because you are what you are. and the person we mean to catch would take fright and take flight, and be over the channel before morning. That must not be. Bear with me. 3 hours. Only tell me, is the Colonel in immediate danger? Not today. He is safer today than he has been these 3 months, but he will be in the greatest danger of his life tonight. With that he was gone. I saw him hail a hansom at the further corner and step in without looking back. I returned to Baker Street. There was, in fact, a telegram upon the salver in the hall, and I took it up to our rooms and set it upon the mantelpiece where he should find it. I could not sit. I paced. I stood at the window. I paced again. At 12:30 there came a soft knock at our door, and Mrs. Hudson admitted a caller. It was the sexton, Sergeant Halloran, hat in hand, standing very upright upon our carpet. His face was set as though for the parade ground, but there was a colour in his cheek I had not seen at St. Ansgar's. "Doctor," said he. The gentleman gave me his card. He said, if there was a thing I remembered, I was to come to him, at whatever hour. I have remembered a thing. He is out, Sergeant, but sit, and tell me. I shall tell him faithfully when he returns. He would not sit. He stood at the corner of the hearthrug, and turned his hat by the brim, once, then again. Mrs. Hudson set down a cup at his elbow, and withdrew with that soft look she keeps for old soldiers. "Speak plainly, Sergeant. He does not care for varnish." "I have no varnish, sir. I have only what I have. In August, sir, when the doctor came to my church, I said he asked me the age of the bell, and admired the tower, and requested to see the stair. That was true. What I did not tell your friend was this. He asked me, upon the porch, whether the tenor bell of St. Ansgar's could be heard as far as Wimpole Street. I told him, sir, that upon a still morning she could be heard as far as Regent's Park, and further, and that a man who knew her could pick her out of a chime of 20. He nodded, sir. He gave me a shilling and thanked me and went away. I thought no more of it, till this morning. That is a valuable memory, Sergeant. He will thank you for it. There is one thing more, sir, and it is the harder to say. He turned the hat again. I have been ashamed to say it. When I found the scratches upon the lock, in the August, I took it upon myself to sit in the church one night, in the vestry, in the dark, to see if any man came. I sat till 2 of the morning. No man came. But at about the half-hour past 1 there was a scraping upon the outside of the tower, a small scraping, like a rat behind wainscot, but going upward. I thought it a rat. It was not a rat. It was, sir, a man upon a ladder at the outside of my tower, and I did not see him, for I was within, and I did not go out to look, for I was, because I was old, sir, and afraid to look, and because I thought, if it is a rat, it is only a rat, and if it is a man, I do not wish to meet him alone. I have carried the shame of that these 3 months. I say it now. There is no shame in it, Sergeant. Had you gone out, you would have taken a knock upon the head, and we should be no further forward. Your remembering it now is worth 20 going-outs then. I shall tell him. He went, still very upright, and would not take the whisky I offered. At the door he paused, and said over his shoulder, in a voice that had lost some of its parade-ground stiffness, "Doctor, tell him, if you please, that I should like to be present when the thing is done. I am too old for a running fight, but I have known that bell 12 years, and if a man has used her wrongly, I should be by, sir, when he pays. I shall tell him. Thank you, sir." I heard his step ring down our stair, even and unhurried, as though he were marching to something he had waited a long while to march to. I wrote out his 2 remembrances upon a sheet at Holmes's desk, and laid it under a paperweight, and I paced again. Some little after 2, Mrs. Hudson came up with a note that had been sent round by hand from Chancery Lane. It was in a formal script. To Mr. Sherlock Holmes, Sir, in further reply to your inquiry of yesterday, I am able to state that the codicil of the 3rd of July was drawn and witnessed by 2 clerks of this office, and lodged with us the same afternoon. Since that date, one further paper has been added, a memorandum in the testator's own hand, sealed and undated, directing that in the event of his decease, his medical attendant should be granted access to a certain locked cabinet in his study. I do not know the contents of the cabinet. I am, at your service, W. Pettifer. I read this 3 times, and each time it left me more uneasy than before. I thought of the study of a man who had not left his bedchamber these 5 weeks, of a locked cabinet in that study, and of a doctor who was to have the freedom of it when the colonel was dead. I set the letter beside the telegram and I paced again. At 3, unable longer to endure it, I put on my coat and walked as far as Regent's Park, and back by another way. I confess I made my return by Wimpole Street, though it was out of my road, and I confess further that I stood a moment upon the pavement opposite number 19 and looked at its shuttered lower windows, and thought of the old soldier in his high bedroom, and of the young woman who read to him behind the further curtain, and of the doctor at his desk, with the copper wire coming out at the wainscot beside his elbow. It was a quiet hour. A butcher's boy went by whistling. A nurse pushed a perambulator along the further pavement. Number 19 showed no more life than a stone. As I stood so, the door of number 17 opened, and a young woman came out, a stranger to me, plainly dressed in dark grey, with a small, quiet face and a nurse's bag in her hand. She glanced neither right nor left. She came down the steps and turned towards Wigmore Street, and walked with the steady, even tread of one who has been all day upon her feet in a ward, and does not mean to hurry now. I watched her go. I knew, though I had never seen her, that this was the cousin from Peterborough of whom Holmes had spoken, and I understood at once, from something in the plain, honest carriage of her, that Holmes had been right about her too. She was a woman who would sign what she was asked to sign, not from wickedness, but from a lifelong habit of trusting the men who set papers before her. She turned the corner. The street was empty again. I reached Baker Street at 4:30. Holmes was not yet returned. I read, and could not read. I ate a plate of Mrs. Hudson's cold beef, and could scarcely taste it. I laid Sergeant Halloran's remembrance upon Holmes's blotter, where he must see it upon his coming in. At 6, the first drops of rain began to strike the window, and by 5:30 he was back, wet and preoccupied, hanging his coat and rubbing his hands, and telling me to eat, that we should have use of our strength. He read the sergeant's paper standing at the desk with his hat still on. He said, "He is a good man, that. He has waited 3 months to say it, and he has said it in the right hour." Then he sat and drank a cup of tea very rapidly, and looked into the fire for perhaps a full minute without moving. "At what hour?" I asked. "At 11:55 tonight, in Wimpole Street." "By the church?" "No, Watson. Not by the church, in the very house." "Holmes," the note from Pettifer. "I have it in my pocket by now, Watson. I know what it says. I had the substance of it from him this morning. He sends this only to be formal upon paper. Yes, there is a cabinet. It contains, I believe, the antidote to the walled sleep. It is the doctor's own contrivance. He set it there upon a day when the colonel yet trusted him. It is his own lifeline, so to speak, the small key to the door he keeps closed on the old man. Should the colonel wake, or seem about to wake, at the wrong moment, the antidote is at hand. He has been very careful, Watson. It is only that he has been careful in a straight line, and one who is careful in a straight line has, at each end of the line, a place where any man may set a foot across. And you have set a foot across. I have set 2 feet across, and I now propose to walk down the line the other way." He warmed his hands. "There is one thing I did not know, and now know, and it changes the shape of the case. There is a train from Peterborough that came in at 3, and there descended from it a young woman with a small trunk who was met by no one, and who put her trunk into a cab, and gave an address I know well. She has come to this house. She has, as we speak, unpacked her trunk in a bedroom of number 17 Wimpole Street. She was not there yesterday. She has not been there these 3 years. Yet she is welcomed. She is expected. She is more than expected. She is called for. Who is she? I shall tell you when I have made certain of one small thing, Watson. At the door of number 17 this very evening. For the moment, eat your dinner. We shall need our wits." At 10:30 we set out. The rain had left a shine on the pavements that took the lamplight in long, tremulous stripes. There were fewer people abroad. Holmes had exchanged his usual coat for a shabbier one, and I noticed that at his belt, under it, he wore something bulky which I supposed to be a lantern of the dark sort. At Wimpole Street he turned, not to number 19, but to number 17, the doctor's own door. He mounted the steps and rang the bell. I confess I was startled. "Holmes, do you go to him?" He is not at home, Watson. He is at the theatre. He has a stall at the Haymarket, procured this morning by my hand, in the name of a Mr. Ainsley who does not exist, and posted to him with an anonymous note that hinted at some professional advantage. His housekeeper has the night off. His servant girl is at a magic lantern lecture in Marylebone Road. There is only the surgery, and a locksmith whose acquaintance I have made, who is at this moment in the area with a small tool I have borrowed. I heard the soft click even as he spoke. The door opened before us upon a dark hall. A slight man in a leather apron stood within, touched his cap, and slipped past us into the night. "Come!" Holmes lit his lantern. We moved down the hall. The doctor's consulting room lay to the right, the dispensary behind it. Holmes went to neither. He mounted the stairs. On the first landing he paused, turned his lantern low, and led me not into any bedchamber, but to a door at the back of the passage, which appeared, at first, to be a linen cupboard. He opened it. Behind was a short, cramped passage, and at its end a further door, and beyond that a room I had not expected, a small, warm, well-appointed sitting room, with a fire that had been lately fed, and a lamp burning low, and a work-basket beside the fireplace, and, upon a table, a plate with the crumbs of a lady's supper. "Whose?" I whispered. "His wife's," said Holmes. "His wife! You said he was a bachelor. So he is described in the street. So he is described in the medical directory. So he has always been described. And yet, Watson, in this room there is a woman's shawl over the chair back. There is embroidery half done, in a hand that is not the housekeeper's. There is upon that mantel a photograph in a silver frame of a young woman of perhaps 26, standing beside our doctor in what is unmistakably a wedding portrait, taken, one may see from the fashion of the dress, some 3 years ago. And there is, in this house, no bedchamber known to the household as hers. She lives here, Watson. She has lived here, one may fairly guess, for the whole of those 3 years, and no one in Wimpole Street knows she exists. Good God! Yes, it is a curious thing, but it is not the curiosity of the case." He was moving as he spoke, quickly, gently, opening and shutting drawers with a hand that did not disturb the pattern of the dust. "Ah, here." From a small locked writing desk, opened with a wire, he drew a bundle of papers tied with pink tape. He glanced through them at speed. He held one up, a bank book. "She has an account, Watson, into which large sums have been paid this summer and autumn, at intervals of a fortnight, from a source I recognize as the Colonel's own bankers." "Payments from the Colonel to her?" "Payments from the Colonel's estate, made under his instruction. Instructions given, one supposes, before he slid into the walled sleep." He drew out another paper. "And here is a fair copy of a codicil to the Colonel's will, in his own hand, dated the 3rd of July. That is, some weeks before he took to his bed, leaving to a certain Mrs. Ellen Farrimond, wife of Enoch Farrimond, physician, the sum of £40,000. The doctor, meanwhile, receives nothing. She receives all. But the Colonel had no—" I stopped. Something in Holmes's face silenced me. "Had no what, Watson? Had no reason to enrich her. Has he not? Read the top of the codicil." I read. The document opened with a plain paragraph. "Whereas the said Ellen Farrimond, formerly Ellen Brenton, is my sister's daughter, and being now the only child of my only sister, and being lately, since her marriage, cut off from the acquaintance of my family, in a manner which I have long regretted." "His niece," I said. "His niece. And more than that, look at the photograph again." I looked, and in that clear, steady face, the pale hair drawn back, the small, firm mouth, the plump white hands folded, I saw at once the same hand I had watched at the window. It was the hand upon the sash. "She goes in to him," I said, understanding at last, "by the back." By the passage that was cut, this summer, through the party wall between number 17 and number 19, a passage which I found this morning behind a bookcase in the doctor's dispensary, and which comes out in a cupboard on the first landing of the Colonel's house. She is with him for 1 hour of every day. She was with him this morning. She was with him yesterday. She has been with him a portion of every day since August. She has cared for him, she has read to him, she has fed him from her own hand, and she has, upon the doctor's instruction, given him also that daily draught which keeps him where he is. But she is his own sister's child. Just so. Holmes's voice grew softer. She loves him, Watson, in the fashion of a niece who has been kept from an uncle by the coldness of the family, and she has been persuaded, I do not doubt, that all this is medicine, and that the daily draught prolongs his life, and that the window opened at 11:50, and the single stroke of the bell that follows are— what? A comfort, a signal from her husband in his own house that all is safe upon his side. She is not our criminal, Watson. She is the instrument. The criminal is the husband, who has taken her and used her love and her ignorance and her hand, and who has arranged that when at last the colonel dies, as he must, if the antidote is withheld 1 week too long, she shall inherit £40,000, of which she, being a married woman under our law and unversed in business, will hold no penny of her own, but which will, by every custom of the world, pass into the pocket of Enoch Farrimond. I stood a moment silent, my hand upon the back of a chair. But the bell, Holmes, why the bell? Ah, that is the neatness of it. Consider his position. He must control the sleep of the colonel to a fine hair. Give too little of the draught, and the old man wakes and speaks. Give too much, and he is dead before the codicil is safely proved. He must therefore adjust his dose day by day, and he must do so in a way that never puts a written instruction into the hand of his wife. For a written instruction is a thing that survives. What does he do? He arranges that at 11:55 each day a bell is rung. If the bell rings once, as it has done, all is well. She is to open the window a half-inch and give the day's usual draught. If it were to ring twice, she was to open the window a full inch and give a smaller measure. If it were not to ring at all, she was to give none. It is a code, Watson, of the plainest kind, invisible because it is audible to every ear in the street and read by only one. And the great beauty of it, from his point of view, is that if ever the affair were called in question, the striking of a church bell could not be laid at any man's door, and his wife's window opening a half-inch to the November air would be no evidence of anything at all. The wire in the church runs from the bell down the outer tower, along the string course, into the chimney of number 17, and so to this room, where it comes out behind that panel. Do you see, Watson, that little brass rosette on the wainscot, which one would take for the head of an ordinary nail? He draws upon the wire from within, at his chosen moment. The bell responds. He does not need to leave his desk. He does not need to be seen from the street. He does not need any accomplice in the church. It is beautiful, Watson. It is a very ugly beauty, but beauty it is. He was silent a moment. He looked at the little sitting room, and at the embroidery upon the chair, and at the plate with its crumbs. His face was without triumph. You said, this evening, that there is a young woman come in from Peterborough. Yes. Who is she? She is the doctor's cousin, on his mother's side. She is a nurse. She has been trained to it these 5 years in a hospital in the north. She is, by every account I have of her from the master of that hospital, a man I telegraphed at 10 this morning, a woman of strong nerves and no imagination. He sent for her yesterday. He met her at Paddington at 3. She is at present in the second bedroom, above our heads. She does not know the wife exists. She has been told that she has come to sit through a night or two with a difficult patient in the next house, whose regular nurse has been taken ill. What is the meaning of that, Holmes? The meaning, Watson, is that our doctor has arranged that a professional witness, a woman he can rely upon to say what she is told to say, and to see what she is told to see, and to speak in the accents of a hospital certificate, shall be at the colonel's bedside when the colonel dies. She will testify to the natural character of the death. She will hold the colonel's hand at his last. She will be, in the eye of any inquiry that may afterwards arise, the answer to every question. And that means, Watson, that our doctor knows the death is upon him. He means to bring it on tonight. Tonight, yes, but surely the wife, he will use the wife still, he must. There is no other tool to his hand. The nurse cousin is his witness, but she is not to know she is a witness at a murder. She is above stairs at this moment writing a letter to her mother. She will be sent for, when the time comes, from that room to this room to that room, in the natural way, and she will find the colonel gone, and she will sign the paper her cousin sets before her, and she will be back in Peterborough by Friday. What he requires from the wife is the hand at the cup. He will bring the cup. He will bring the reason. She will lift the old man's head and give it him, and it will be done. He would use her still? He has used her thus far. He will use her again. He has no other tool. Watson, do you see the ugliness of it now? He has kept her 3 years hidden in this house. He has arranged that the world does not know she is his wife. That is not for her sake. That is against her. He is preparing, on the far side of this business, to say to any who ask, should any ask, and I mean that they shall, that he has no wife, and never had one, and knew of no Mrs. Farrimond, and that the woman who used to visit the Colonel from the back of number 17 was some cousin or dependent. He has arranged his own escape by his own concealment of her. She is not only his tool, she is his fall guy. If the will is questioned, if the death is questioned, if any hand is looked for, it is her hand that is found, and no marriage lines to bind her to him. Then she is doubly betrayed. Doubly. It will not hold, Watson, because Mr. Pettifer has the marriage register signed and witnessed and lodged with him. She was clever enough there, or her uncle was, when the codicil was drawn. But our doctor believes it will hold. He believes it because he has ordered his fear into small tidy drawers, and told himself for so long that the drawers are strong. Come, we must be ready. Holmes rose and went softly to the door and beckoned me after. Now, Watson, we go to number 19, by the passage. By the passage. We passed down through the doctor's dispensary. Holmes drew aside a bookcase. I saw now the well-oiled runners upon which it swung, and disclosed the mouth of a low corridor, plastered plainly, no more than 3 yards long, ending in a door. He unlocked it with a key he had had upon him all evening. We entered a linen cupboard on the first landing of number 19. We came out into a dark hall smelling faintly of tincture and warm wool. There was a light under a door at the end. That is the Colonel's bedchamber, Holmes whispered. She may be there. At this hour. She may be there, said Holmes again, for she has been told that if the bell should ring in the night, she must go to him. He has trained her to it, that when the time comes, she will not think it strange. We crept forward. Holmes laid his hand upon the door and opened it a hair's breadth. I saw a large, old-fashioned bedroom, dim under a shaded lamp. In the great bed at the further end lay a man of a great age, and, at first glance, of the tranquil face of one who sleeps well. His hair upon the pillow was white. His hand, outside the coverlet, was thin and brown, with the ring of some old regiment. It was Colonel Sir Marcus Brenton. He was breathing. It was a shallow, even, unnatural breathing, as of a mechanism, and beside him, in a low chair, sat the young woman of the photograph. She was in a dark dress, with a shawl over her shoulders, and she was reading softly aloud from a small book, some devotional piece, I think, for I caught the phrase, "as a shepherd," and her voice was steady and low, and had in it the tenderness of true affection. Upon the small table beside her stood a covered cup. Holmes did not enter. He drew back and closed the door as gently as it had been opened. He led me to the head of the stairs, and there, in the shadow, we waited. Now, he breathed, and put his lips almost to my ear. He will come. He will not come by the front, for he has told his servants he is at the theatre, and does not wish to be met upon his return. He will come by the passage. He will pass through the linen cupboard where we have just stood. He will go to that room. He will speak to her. He will hand her the cup, a fresh cup, from his own pocket. He will tell her the Colonel is failing and requires it at once, and he will stand at her elbow while she gives it. That is his design. She will believe him. She will lift her uncle's head and she will pour, with her own hand, the finishing draught. He will then send her up to fetch the nurse cousin from her writing desk. By the time the nurse comes down, he will have taken the empty cup with him and left in its place another, containing only water. And he will say that the old man had a spasm, and that the wife gave him a little water in the hope of relieving it, and that the spasm has carried him off. The nurse will sign what she is asked to sign. He will then withdraw. He will be seen by his own servants at midnight in his own dressing gown, having, they will suppose, returned quietly by his own front door. In the morning, she will discover the Colonel dead. She will call for her husband. Her husband will certify the death as the natural termination of a long decline. She will weep, she will inherit, and that will be that. Good God, Holmes. We stop him at the cup, Watson, not before. If we stop him at the door, he will say he has come home from the theatre and mistaken his passage. He will laugh and go, and tomorrow the wire will be gone from the tower, and the passage will be plastered over, and he will begin again, in some other street, with some other victim. We must have the cup in his hand and the intention on his lips before her. Only so shall we lay the whole thing bare, and only so shall she believe. Do you understand me? She must hear him tell her to give it. We must not spare her that. It is a hard thing to sit and let him do it. It is. But it is a harder thing to see him walk free because we were quick. Watson, keep your hand from your pocket until I give the word. If she sees a revolver before she has heard him speak, she will not hear him. We waited. The old house creaked. Below us in the hall, the tall clock struck 11 and its half. I have often thought since of that half-hour upon the landing of the Colonel's house. It was the longest half-hour I remember to have spent, though it can have been no more than the running of a small clock. I stood in the shadow, my back to a papered wall, and heard the tick of the tall clock upon the landing below, and the faint even breathing of the old man in the further room, and, at intervals, the soft murmur of his niece's voice as she read to him. She was reading, I fancied, some passage from a book of Psalms. I caught the word waters and the word pastures, and, later, the phrase, "Yea, though I walk." I remember thinking how, in that small, kind, steady voice, the great words made themselves quiet, as they will do when they are read by love and not by ceremony. Once, in that stretch, I felt Holmes stir beside me, and I turned my face to him. He was standing very still, with his hand upon the wall as a man will who is measuring something within his own mind, and his lips moved a little without sound. It came to me that he was going over his arrangements one by one, as a soldier will go over the field before an action, to see that nothing has been left. I saw his hand shape the rim of the cup that was not yet there. I saw his head turn 1/4 of an inch, as though he had heard a step upon a stair that had not yet begun to sound. I have known Holmes in many hours. I have not often seen him at that particular kind of stillness. It is the stillness of the man who has done all he can do, and can now only wait, and knows that another life turns upon whether he has done rightly. Below us, a coal fell in the grate of the kitchen, and I started so violently that his hand went to my sleeve to steady me. He did not look at me, he only pressed, once, and let go. Upon the further landing there was, at the corner of the wall where the shadow was deepest, a small round table, with a jar of dried grasses upon it. I remember that I fixed my eyes upon that jar, and counted its grasses, and had reached 17 when the sound of the latch came at last from the cupboard behind us. It is a foolish thing to remember, but the mind does foolish things when it is holding its breath. The 17th grass had a bent head. I have thought of it since, at odd hours, and been unable to say why. Then, from the linen cupboard behind us, we heard the smallest sound, a soft, careful click of a latch. A shadow moved along the wall. It passed within 3 feet of us, and did not see us. It was a man in a black coat, hat in hand, with something in his pocket that made his coat hang a little to one side. He went to the door of the bedchamber. He tapped and entered. Holmes was at the door on the instant, and I with him. He stayed his hand upon the handle. He listened. Within, we heard the doctor's voice, mild, low, a little breathless, as of a man who has hurried. "Ellen, my dear, you are still here. That is well. He is worse. I have felt him. The Peterborough train has brought some further news, a matter of the estate, and it must be quickly done. Give him this cup, my love, before he stirs. Here." We heard the small sound of a cup set down upon the table. We heard her voice, uncertain. "But he had his draught this evening at 7. This is another, my dear. Prepared for this very case. Do not delay. Lift his head. Enoch, his colour is not so bad. See, only... Ellen, do as I ask." There was a pause. It was so long a pause that I heard Holmes's own breath beside me. Then her voice, lower, quieter, but with a new note in it, a note I did not at first place. "Why do you not give it yourself?" "My dear, I have said. It must be given at once. My hand is not steady. I am too anxious. Please, take it. Your hand has never trembled in this room. Ellen, there is no time. There is time enough. And then Holmes opened the door. I shall not soon forget the face of Enoch Farrimond in that moment. It did not change all at once. First there was surprise, quite mild, as of a man interrupted at a common task. Then there was a slow whitening about the mouth. Then there was a look, the only word I have for it is calculation, as of a mind flying, very fast, from door to door, and finding each one shut. Then, at last, there was the thing beneath, a cold, contemptuous still anger, as steady as a lamp behind a shade. He did not speak. Holmes said quietly, "Mrs. Farrimond, set down the cup. Do not touch it further. You do not know what is in it. Your husband does." She turned her face slowly from her husband to Holmes and back again. She was very pale. She set down the cup as one who does not know she has done it. Her hand went to her throat, but her voice, when it came, was steady. "I have not touched it, sir. I was not going to." "You were not?" said Holmes gently. "No, sir. I do not know who you are, but I know my husband. He has not been anxious in this room these 3 months. His hand has not shaken. He has come at 7 every evening, and he has not once been in a hurry. Tonight he is in a hurry. Tonight his hand shakes. Tonight the cup he brings is not the cup I know, and it has not the smell I know. I was not going to give it him." She looked at her uncle. "I was going to sit here until I understood what to do," he said, then for the first time, and it was a small dry voice, quite even, quite unhurried, and I heard in it what I had not heard till then, that this was a man very much accustomed to speak with the voice he chose. "Ellen, my dear, you do not know these gentlemen. They are not friends of ours. Come away from that table." "I shall not come away. Ellen, I shall not." Holmes took 2 paces forward. "Dr. Farrimond, I have here in my pocket a copy of the codicil of the 3rd of July, and I have upon my person the bank book of your wife's private account, and I have measured with my own eye the wire that runs from the Tower of St. Ansgar's to a rosette in the wainscot of your parlour, and I have this morning had the honour of a long conversation with Mr. Pettifer of Chancery Lane, who is a very careful man. I do not think you will care, this evening, to make any statement. You are entitled to withhold it. I would only ask you to consider that your wife is entitled to hear one. There is nothing in the cup," he said, "but water and a little sugar. You will find it so upon analysis." "I shall have it analysed," said Holmes calmly, "within the hour. If you speak the truth, sir, no harm is done. If you do not, we shall be spared the labour of guessing at motive. In the meanwhile, I have taken the liberty of asking Inspector Bradstreet to attend at your own front door at midnight. I hear his knock now. I heard nothing. I think Holmes had heard nothing either. But the doctor's eye went, for the first time, to the window, and his shoulders dropped by the smallest degree, and in that giving way, I saw that Holmes had guessed rightly, that this was a man who had lived so long inside his own scheme, that when a door closed at the wrong end of it, the whole house fell. He said, still very quietly, "You will not analyse it, sir. There is no need." He turned to his wife. "Ellen," he said. It was the first time his voice had changed. "I did not mean you any harm." She looked at him. She did not weep. She said, in a whisper, "You meant him harm. He was old, Ellen. He was going. Another month at the most. I only—" "You gave me the cup," she said, and there was in her voice, for the first time, something that was not tenderness. "You gave me the cup with your own hand." He said nothing more. I confess I could not, in that instant, look at either of them. I looked instead at the old man in the bed, who lay with his even shallow breathing, and whose thin brown soldier's hand, outside the coverlet, had never stirred through it all. There was a further sound upon the stairs then, a firm tread, and a low official voice, and I understood that Holmes had not been guessing about the inspector after all. Bradstreet came in with his hat in his hand, and a sergeant behind him, and he took one look at the room, and one at Holmes, and he said only, "Sir, I have my men at both doors." "Good," said Holmes. "Dr. Farrimond, I do not think there is more to be done here. Inspector, this cup, if you please, and this cup only, the covered one. The other belongs to the household. It should be sealed. The wife of the accused," he glanced at her, and his voice softened, "will not be required tonight. She has had, I think, enough of it." Dr. Farrimond went with them quietly and did not look again at his wife. The cup was taken from the table by Holmes with a handkerchief, and sealed and taken away, and it was found upon the following day to contain a solution of a certain vegetable alkaloid in a quantity sufficient to have finished the walled sleep of Colonel Sir Marcus Brenton within half an hour. There was indeed no water and no sugar. There was death enough for two. We stayed in that bedchamber some time after they had gone. Holmes summoned the housekeeper, who had been asleep at the top of the house. She brought coffee and stood by, weeping in that dry, astonished way of servants who have missed the storm. Mrs. Farrimond sat where she had sat, but she did not read. She had her uncle's brown hand between her own hands and was looking at it, without speaking. I said to Holmes low, "The nurse, the cousin." "I met her upon the landing, coming down at the sound of voices," he answered. "I sent her back to her room. She knew nothing. She still knows nothing. In the morning, I shall tell her enough." Holmes at length went to Mrs. Farrimond. He said, in a voice I had never heard from him before, "Madam, if you will trust me, I have brought with me a colleague from St. Bartholomew's who knows the counter-agent for that particular preparation. Your uncle can be brought back, I believe, within a day. He will wake, and he will be told, so far as we can help it, only what he must be told." She looked up. She said only, "Please." There was, at that hour, a Dr. Vane below stairs, whom Holmes had had at the door of number 21, since 10, in case the affair should go otherwise than he had planned. He came up. He did what was proper. I saw the old colonel's eyelid twitch within an hour, and by dawn he had opened his eyes and looked at his niece and said, in the thin voice of a man returning from a great distance, "Ellen, my dear, there you are." He did not remember that he had been away. We left that house at 7 in the morning. It was raining still. Holmes walked with his hands in his pockets, and his hat down against the rain, and we did not speak until we had turned into Marylebone Road. Then he said, "You will observe, Watson, that a bell is a very old instrument, and was used by kings to summon their servants long before there were doctors in Wimpole Street. It has this virtue: no one thinks a bell is speaking to them, unless they are the one to whom it speaks. And she is. She is a widow now, in law though not yet in fact. She will be. He will be tried and he will hang. She will inherit her uncle's £40,000 when in the fullness of time he does die, which I hope will be many years hence, and she will spend it, I think, well. She was ill-used, Watson, most of all in that she was made to love and made to serve, and the love and the service were turned to a knife in another man's hand. But she saw the knife at the last. That is what I did not know I should see when I opened the door." "You did not know she would refuse?" "I did not, Watson. I confess it. I had built the whole scheme upon the certainty that she would obey him, as she had obeyed him these 3 months. I had staked my life, and Bradstreet's, and yours, upon her being the tool she had always been. And when she said, 'I shall not,' I understood, for the first time in the case, that I had misjudged one thing entirely. I had thought her broken. She was not broken. She was only silent. We walked on. At the corner of Baker Street he stopped. "I had one further fear," he said, "which I will now confess to you. I was afraid that I should be wrong about the passage. If there were no passage, there was no case, only a wire and a bell and a coincidence. I looked for that bookcase for 20 minutes yesterday afternoon before I put my shoulder to it. When it moved upon its runners, Watson, I very nearly laughed aloud. You never told me. I never tell you the fears, only the answers." He glanced at me sidelong, with the ghost of that thin smile. "It preserves my reputation." We turned in at our door. Mrs. Hudson had a fire going and a breakfast laid, though it was scarcely light, for she had heard us come, and, being what she was, had said nothing, but had put the kettle on. Holmes ate 3 eggs and a good deal of bacon. He did not, that morning, speak of the bell again. It was some weeks afterward, when the case had gone through its slow public course and Dr. Enoch Farrimond had received his sentence, and Colonel Sir Marcus Brenton had walked, upon a stick, into our sitting-room to shake Holmes by the hand, that I asked my friend the one question I had left. "How did you know, Holmes, so early, before ever we went to the church that morning, that it was a signal to a woman in that house? You said, in the alley, that the door had twitched because habit betrays us all. But you might, then, have supposed 100 things. He was at his violin. He did not answer at once. He drew the bow across and let the note die. "Because, Watson," he said, "of the wire on my sleeve. It had come off, you will remember, upon a certain door in Wimpole Street. It was of the gauge used in domestic bell systems. But a domestic bell system runs from the front door and the drawing room to the servants' hall, and its wire is dressed and hidden. This wire had come loose from an outside fitting high up. I asked myself, what fitting could be high on that house and yet be of that gauge? A house bell for the tradesman does not run so. A servant's summons does not run so. Only a wire meant to reach further than the house and to be tugged from a low room to a high place would be so long and so plain. And a wire meant to be tugged in a house where there is only one patient who cannot move means a wire meant to be tugged by another hand. From the moment I picked it off my sleeve, I knew there was a second person in that house who was neither doctor nor servant. I did not then know it was his wife. I knew it when the door twitched at the bell. A servant would not have moved. A doctor was upstairs. Only somebody who was waiting for the bell to speak, and had made herself a habit of standing near a door as it did, could have given the door that little jump. And the only somebody in that house who would fit was a somebody who did not officially exist. He set the violin down. He looked at the fire. There was a great deal I might have been wrong about, Watson. I was not wrong about the door. He was silent a moment, and then, as though he had suddenly remembered a small thing, he added, "St. Ansgar's, by the by, has hung a new rope this week. The old one was frayed at the shoulder. Sergeant Halloran took me up to see it yesterday. He rang the bell for me, 3 good strokes at 3 of the afternoon, in daylight, before all the pigeons in Wimpole Street. It made a very different sound, Watson, from the sound it made at 11:55. "How different?" "It sounded," said Sherlock Holmes, "like a bell."